Pull up a chair and buckle up. It's the Original Strength Podcast. Hey everyone, got a super show for you today. I am talking with the living legend, Lynne Cox. Lynne is an open water distance swimmer, author, speaker, and the ambassador of peace. In 1987, she swam across the Bering Strait from Alaska to Russia during the middle of the Cold War. In fact, she is credited with helping ease Cold War tensions and putting an end to the Cold War. President Gorbachev even spoke her name in a meeting with President Reagan. Fantastic, phenomenal lady who knows no obstacles, no quit, and she's a fantastic author as well. Guys, I think you're going to like this show. I sure did. It's the Original Strength Podcast. Lynne, you are a real live superhero. You're a world-class, world elite swimmer. You're an author. You're a speaker. But you're so much more than that. You're an ambassador to peace. So you are a superhero. And you are recognized as possibly helping really ease Cold War tensions when you swam between the United States and Russia, or the Bering Strait. What does it even feel like to be recognized as someone that could have eased Cold War tensions through a crazy dream to me? Like, I read your story about that. I'm like, that sounds nuts.
It was a crazy dream. I mean, the idea of swimming across the Bering Strait to open a border between the United States and Soviet Union was crazy, but it was something that as I started working on it, I believed more and more in it. And the thing that was so exciting was that there's a border between the US and Soviet Union, halfway between Little Diomede, the United States, and Big Diomede, which was Soviet Union, now Russia. So the idea to swim across was exciting, but the idea too is that I would swim from the present into the future because you go across the international date line. So the idea was to do something that would be significant in the world. And, it was not easy because there were so many people that just said, there's no way the Soviets will allow you to do it. And there's no way you can swim in. Nobody really knew what the water temperature was except for the people that lived on Little Diomede. And eventually I found out that the water temperature would be 38 degrees. So the idea of swimming in a swimsuit, cap, and goggles in 38-degree water for, well, it would turn out to be 5 miles was just impossible. But I think that, when we do big goals, we just take them as they come and try to break them down into smaller pieces and to make them, one step at a time versus trying to close a huge gap. And that's the way I worked at it.
Would you say, would you say you consider yourself a person of faith?
I do have great faith. I think that in order to do things that have never been done before, you have to have faith in yourself and the belief in others that you can do something and that you can trust in their support. But I have faith in God, and I think that helps me do things that are really challenging. But really too, it's that when you're trying to do something that's really extremely difficult, it's so important to have people around you that believe in you, but also that they will question what you're doing in a way that supports you, not something that'll tear you down. So through time, I've learned that it's really important to have a core around you that will be there to help you. Like, for instance, when I did a swim in Antarctica, I had doctors on board who would be there in case something went wrong. And I had a team there that could pluck me out of the water if I suddenly went into cardiac arrest. So I trusted that people would be there, and they were. But I also learned to not have naysayers around me. There was a doctor on the swim that I was doing in Antarctica who really was negative. And I actually, in my head, called him Dr. Death because he just really wanted, I think, something extreme to happen so he could be the hero. And so I made sure that my 3 doctors who were with me were the buffer between me and him so that I didn't absorb that negative energy. But we prepared and we did the things we needed to do, and we did the tests that we needed to do in advance to make sure that I'd be safe. But there was no way I was going to put myself in somebody's hands that I didn't trust.
That that is wisdom that'll preach right there. Um, the reason I asked you that though is because you showed up to swim the Bering Strait that day before Russia had even given you permission.
Yes, because it was such a difficult thing to do. And I wouldn't find out until later that there was within the Soviet Union a lot of question about what I was doing. Because where I wanted to swim was basically a place that was used to monitor all traffic through the Bering Strait. So we were landing on a very sensitive place in the Soviet Union. And people in the KGB didn't want that to happen, but at the same time, President Gorbachev was talking about glasnost and openness and trying to encourage better relations with the US. So there were different fractions within the government in the Soviet Union that were discussing whether or not this was a smart thing to do. So it wasn't until 2 days before the actual swim that I would finally get clearance. But I figured that we needed to be in a position that we could go forward fast and get to Little Diomede Island, because part of this swim was so challenging because of the weather. Within a day, weather changes in the lower 48 pretty quickly, but within the Bering Strait, it can change within hours. And so we had to be ready if there was a window of good weather to be able to go.
So when you made it across and you met your Russian neighbors, people you didn't really know, and they greeted you with smiles and hugs, what was that like?
It was incredible because, when I grew up in initially New Hampshire, we were taught as kids that the Soviets might blow up a nuclear bomb in our neighborhood, and we are supposed to jump under our desks to protect us from that. I mean, you look at that now and go, that was nuts. Not that we needed to protect ourselves, but that our desks could save us from something
Right.
like that. So to grow up with this big fear of the Soviets and then to land on the Soviet shores and to have Russian soldiers greeting me and throwing blankets over my shoulders and men taking off their coats and people with samovars full of tea to welcome us with that and all sorts of cookies and have a big fat fest, a picnic on the Siberian beach was just amazing. It was, unbelievable, sort of living a dream, and seeing it happen unfold before our eyes. It was fantastic. And our the team that was with me, which was a combination of physicians and Inuits who guided us in their walrus-skin boats, and to land on the Soviet shores and have people from all over the Soviet Union who'd been flown out to greet us, along with the head of the KGB, who was a woman wearing high heels and walking on really, icy rocks. And to see how excited they were to greet us was just incredible. That it was something that they were as excited about as we were.
That's truly amazing.
It was.
So you said the water was like 38 degrees, but you also mentioned
Yeah.
swimming to Antarctica. Well, what was the temperature of that water?
The water off the shores of Antarctica when I did the swim was 32 degrees. And I wore a swimsuit, bathing cap, and goggles, and that was it because I was really talking about or trying to demonstrate the human ability that we can go so much further than we ever expected. And it took me years, I mean, years and years of swimming in colder and colder waters and for longer periods of time. And, when I swam the Bering Strait in 38-degree water, that was the coldest swim I'd ever done. And to go 6 degrees colder was just like going to the moon. It was 6 degrees was a huge difference. But again, I had support crew around me that, everything from Quark Expeditions that had a ship that went along and three Zodiac boats, two of them out in front and one right beside me with people on board watching the water to help me navigate, but also in case there were icebergs so that we wouldn't run into them. But there were also leopard seals there that were dangerous. And so I needed a crew there to be able to pull me out of the water quickly if there was a problem and to have confidence that they could do that. It sounds like a little thing, but it was a really big
No,
thing.
that doesn't sound like a little thing at all. How many
Yeah.
hours did that take?
Actually, the actual swim took 23 minutes. I swam
Oh,
1.22 miles.
that's
And
long enough.
yeah, it was. But, it was really funny because as we started to come into shore, I thought, you know what? There are going to be other people that are going to want to do this. And I can see another place where I could land. It's about a half a mile from where I'm finishing the swim. And maybe I could go further. Maybe I could just, push it out there so that when somebody else wants to try this, it makes it really difficult for them. And then I thought, that's really stupid.
Perhaps the
Because
32 degrees will make it difficult.
exactly. Well, the problem is that when you swim in really super cold water, the peripheral area of your body cools down and the blood under your skin cools down. So you don't know how cold you really are until you stop swimming, because
Mm,
then the peripheral blood starts circulating into the core of your body. And that can cause your body temperature to drop. And it can cause it to drop pretty quickly because you're no longer exercising and you're no longer creating heat. So the whole situation is called after drop. So I didn't know how cold I would be after swimming for 23 minutes. So, to swim another 10 or 15 might have been really a bad idea. So I thought, when people do major events, sometimes they're unsatisfied with what they've achieved. And I thought, you need to be satisfied with this. You need to realize it was a huge effort and to be happy with the success and stop now. And if somebody wants to go further in the future, then that's their challenge. But be safe and live and live do other things that you want to do that are colder or more difficult, you know?
and well, you've done plenty of very difficult swims and things like that. So, and just considering that, your swims in the cold water and stuff, do you ever get stressed out?
Actually, I get stressed out when I can't swim.
Ah,
There have been times in my life, there was one time in my life where I was taking care of my parents who were both ill and elderly. And that got me super stressed out because I couldn't swim because I needed to be there all the time to help take care of them. And now looking back on that, I realized that was a huge mistake that I really should have gone swimming and had somebody fill in for me. But you can't go and undo those things, but you can also realize that part of the reason I love to swim and love to work out, do calisthenics, do light weights, is because it makes me feel good. It keeps me strong, but it also is a mental break from the day to dayness of everything that goes on. And the workout helps me clear my head and make me feel good. And when I can't do that, I find myself sometimes getting more agitated or a little grumpy. Or so wherever I am, I try to make sure that if I can't swim, that I do a long walk or I do calisthenics, or if I have access to a gym that I feel comfortable going into at this time in life, that I'll do that.
awesome. Given your tenacity, and your, I would just call it grit. Uh, were you born with that, or is that something you cultivated? Is it something you saw from somebody else that you wanted? Like, where did that come from?
Well, actually, my parents would say that I was stubborn, and a friend who was a psychologist said, she's determined. I like that word better, but I think I can also be stubborn. So I think that that was there. But I think that having parents that were really great role models helped me stick with goals or set goals. I mean, I remember years ago, my sister coached swimming and she had a young 9-year-old boy ask her, what's a goal? And so she had to go back and reevaluate what is a goal and how do you set one? Because it was so part of her nature and it's been so part of my nature to say, okay, this is where I am in my life. And these are the things that I want to do. And how can I take the steps to get there? And that became part of what I do all the time. I mean, not just with being an athlete, but also a motivational speaker and also an author. How do you get from where you are now to the next point? And I've been really lucky because I've been able to find mentors, and I've been able to have friends that have guided me, and I've been able to also do a lot of research on how do you do this next.
Right
You
on.
know, the swims that I've done, for instance, they a lot of times they've never been done before because there's a lot to figure out. You know, what are the currents? What are the water temperatures? How do you get boat support? How do you get to that part of the world? Who's going to support you? How do you find local knowledge? All of these things are involved in doing a swim. You know, I never just jump in and swim. And the same thing with my writing. You know, when I'm working on a new book, initially it's an idea like a big swim idea. You know, it just comes to me like, I really want to work on that. And then I start doing research on it. And then as I do the research, then I start talking to people so I can be informed when I start talking to them. And then those questions and answers just help me build on that and be able to write a book.
So yes, I like the word determined. You're obviously very determined, and all of those logistical things can only be met by a determined person.
Yes, yes. But, you know, also that determination sometimes can get you in trouble because sometimes you need to stop and sometimes you need to evaluate. And sometimes you go, wait, this way it's not working. You know, I need to find another way. Or maybe I've gone as far as I can with this. And now it's time to look at something else. Yeah.
So speaking of books, you mentioned you're an author and you've written quite a few books. When did you discover that you were a writer?
You know, as a child, I knew that I wanted to write books. I love to read. I love that an author could transport you into different worlds and could inspire you or could inform you or could take you to places that you could go in your mind. And so I knew as a child that I wanted to be an author. In college, I went to UC Santa Barbara and studied history because I was trying to figure out how people make a difference in the world. You know, before Gandhi was Gandhi, what was he doing? You know,
Oh, good
before
question.
people became who they were, how did they get there? So for me, studying history was very personal. I love to study individuals and see how they transform themselves and were able to make a positive difference in the world. So that was what I did in order to look at becoming an author. And I decided that I just didn't want to study literature, which I did. I studied some literature. I'd studied American literature, European literature, Russian literature, but I really wanted to find examples of how people make a difference. And then when I went to UC Santa Barbara, I had a professor who was a poet named John Ridland, who taught English 101, and he was a swimmer. And he said, you know, you really should write about your experiences. And I said, I really want to do that. And he encouraged me to take a creative writing course by Stephen Alaback. And so in that writing class, you were supposed to write 3 or 10 or 12 pages and then submit the work to the class, and they would evaluate it and criticize it and comment on it. And then you go back and write more. And so after one of those sessions, I thought, this isn't really what I want to do. I really want to write a book. So I went to the professor and said, you know, Dr. Alaback, would it be okay instead of writing a few pages, could I just write a book in your class? And he knew what my background was, and he knew I was a long distance swimmer. And he knew that I was really committed to this. So he said, okay, what I'd like you to do is go ahead and see if in 8 weeks you can write a book and I will evaluate it. So over the course of the next quarter, I did that and submitted it to him. And he gave me an A+ in the course and said, this is a great book. It only took me 21 years to get it published. I would wind up revising it 11 times over 21 years. I would try to get it published. I'd go to New York and meet with publishing houses and try to meet with agents. And finally, my second cousin was Anne Rice, and my cousin who knew her very well offered to reach out to her. And at first I didn't want to impose on her, but after 10 years of trying to get published on my own, I decided that let me try through a connection. And she read Swimming to Antarctica, my first book, and said it was fantastic. And she said, can I give it to my editor at Knopf, Vicki Wilson? And I said, please. And so about a week later, I heard from Vicki Wilson, who said, I love your book. I would love to publish it. You need an agent. Here are two possibilities. And so I wrote Martha Kaplan and decided that she was the best agent for me. And she had been the executive editor for the New Yorker, and she'd been a senior editor at Knopf. She was like the Olympic coach. And so she gave me some suggestions, and I made changes very quickly. And a year later, the book was published and became a New York Times bestseller. So I was really, 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 really lucky. But again, I realized that, I had somebody who was willing to help me and mentor me and gave me that start. And I'll always be grateful for that. You
So
know,
you say you were lucky, but you said it took 21 years. I will go back
yes.
to your original word, determined.
Yes, I was determined. But also, it was really discouraging to get turned down over and over again, but then to finally make that connection. And I was really fortunate that I was also connected to artists, because one of my best friends is a woman named Deborah Ford, and she was a fashion designer. And I would see her coming out with new lines of clothing every 2 weeks or even more than that. And sometimes a line of clothing would sell, and sometimes she would put something out there, and it wouldn't be until 6 months later when she changed the zipper or a button and it would sell. So she was incredibly encouraging to me and just said, just keep trying. But sometimes you can't, if you just keep trying the same way, nothing happens.
Mm.
So my new way was to reach out to my cousin's cousin, my second cousin, and say, please, will you give me a hand? And she was more than happy to help. And that opened the door. And now I've written 7 books and feel so fortunate, because the first book, Swimming to Antarctica, became a New York Times bestseller. My second book, Grayson, became a New York Times bestseller. And all the other books in between have sold really well. And I've written a children's book, and I'm working on another one, and have this new book coming out in May.
No, yeah, no, and that's the great thing about your books is that they're your adventures.
They're my adventures, but they're also more than that. I mean, they always have the element of swimming,
Hmm.
but they're all different stories. And
Oh
that's
yeah.
what makes me different. But a lot of times an author will write a very similar book over and over again. And mine are not like that. So if you've read Swimming to Antarctica and you expect my next book to be another Swimming to Antarctica, a collection of great adventures and stories that you learn from, Grayson is not that story. It's a story about a gray whale that gets lost off California. Then I wrote an open water swimming manual, and it's really about swimming for the beginning, the advanced, and the swimmer that's going way beyond boundaries. So it's not like the other books. And so, one of the things I have to be able to do is explain that the new book that I've worked on, Tales of Al, the water rescue dog, there are elements about swimming and about overcoming great obstacles and belief in yourself and adventures. But this book really includes a lot about dogs. And so, what I'm hoping is that people who love dogs will love this story, but also the people that have followed all these different books and had all these different adventures with me vicariously and gone on to do their own great goals will be interested in learning about all kinds of dogs swimming and rescuing people.
You know what? I think it's possible that if someone reads Tales of Al, they don't even have to be a dog lover to fall in love with dogs.
Oh, I love that.
Like
I hope that's
especially,
true.
I mean, the ending, I was like, wow.
Yeah, it was it's really funny because when I went to Italy to learn about the Italian rescue dogs, I just had to find out more about them. And I didn't go with the intention of writing a book, but the story unfolded before me. And that was what was so exciting, is that each of the books that I've written have found their own way, that the way I tell the story about Al is a different story than the one that I told about swimming to Antarctica, or that I told about Elizabeth, which is a children's book about a elephant seal that decided to live in Christchurch, New Zealand. and how the families and people that live, other people that lived in Christchurch, New Zealand, would come to visit her, and how she became sort of a hero within Christchurch. So, that was what was really interesting too, that when I had this experience in Italy, all these other stories came back to me too about dogs and swimming, and how dogs rescue people and how we rescue dogs, and how there's this symbiosis, a really beautiful thing that happens between us and dogs.
Well, I think too, I mean, you could even say dogs rescue people without even pulling them out of the water, though.
Oh yeah. Yeah. I wonder, do you have a dog?
I grew up with dogs all the time. Once I got married and had kids, then I had kids.
Yes,
and
that
and
makes sense. I think it's sometimes really hard to do both.
it I you know and well, so now my kids are about to I'm about to be an empty nester, and I've been looking at
Oh,
dogs like crazy because I'm gonna be lonely. So I have my eye on dogs.
so what kind of breeds are you looking at?
Oh man, it's a German. I can't pronounce the name right. Wallenheimer. It's a German gray dog looking.
Weimaraner, the
Yes, yes,
Weimaraner.
yeah.
They're wonderful dogs. And there, I know a couple in our neighborhood. And as a kid growing up, I knew one that I just really loved. They're good swimmers. They sometimes have separation anxiety, though. That's
Ah,
the only downside of the breed. They call them the silver ghosts, and they're sweet, sweet dogs.
yes. They
Um,
they look confident. They are athletic, and they just look like a just a good dog,
they love to run.
which is good.
Wow. Yeah. You run with them. You would run with them.
I would, yeah, short distances. Like it would be like we both chase the frisbee together, but we wouldn't be. I wouldn't do a marathon. I'm not like you, Lynn.
That's okay. I'm not a runner. So, we have our different things that we do.
But you like to cover great vast distances, and I have a car for that. So
S- Yeah, well, we have our own ways of going through the world. And for me, it's been really great to be a swimmer, because the people that are swimmers tend to be people that get happy when they get in the water. It's there's something about being buoyant. It lifts our spirits. And it's funny because we talk about this a lot about, sometimes you get up in the morning and you go, I don't really feel like swimming today. Yeah, I'm kind of tired, or the water's really cold and rough, or, just don't feel like it. And then you get in and you swim and you come out and you never regret getting up and working out, that
mm.
you just feel better for it. I have never heard of anyone coming out of workout going, gee, I wish I didn't do it.
So reading Tales of Al helped me understand myself, because like I think it was during the dinner that you had with the Italians where they were talking about different dogs are suited for swimming better than others. And then I thought, well,
Yes.
wait a minute, that means different people are probably suited for swimming better than others, because I swim like a rock. So
Yes, and so that totally makes sense, because you're lean body mass, because you're a lot of muscle, so you probably float lower in the water. And for people that are lean, or often little tiny boys, they don't float really well. So there are key things that you teach to help. Like for instance, when you're trying to get a little boy to float on his back, you have, not all little boys, but some that are very lean. You have them like lie on their back and pretend they have a quarter between their shoulder blades, and they have to push back really hard, and that will arch their back and keep their head up. And then they have to kick their feet gently to keep them up. So, there are things that you learn through the years that help people that float. You'll just float at a lower level.
I'll be trying that next time I go to the pool. Then we'll see. So Tales of Al, you said that's coming out soon. When is that coming out?
On May 24th, we're doing a big launch of Tales of Al at a bookstore in Manhattan Beach called Pages. And then I'm doing a 7-week book tour all over the United States. So the first part of the tour will be up the West Coast, then down the East Coast, then around the Great Lakes, and then the Pacific Northwest, and then back down to Southern California. And I really can't wait, because I love the people that read my books. They're so enthusiastic. And I also love dogs. So now there'll be people that are dog lovers as well. And the energy level to be on this tour will be just fantastic. I can't wait. Yeah.
That's exciting. And does the tour start in May, or does the tour start in June?
The tour starts on May 24th, and
Okay.
then I go south to Southern California, and then there's the Memorial Day weekend, so there's a little break, and then I go basically along the coast of California up um, as far as Folsom and maybe Reno. I'm not sure yet. We're waiting for confirmation on that. And then we go to the East Coast. My husband and I is like my major supporter, and so he's going to be coming with me on this grand tour. And so I'm going to post it on my Facebook, www.lynnecox.com. So we're going to post it in stages. So the first stage will go up as we get confirmation, and then the second stage, and on and on.
No, I got really excited when I realized that, because I was on your website today and it said big announcement coming out April 7th about the dates of your tour. And I was like, hey, today is actually April 7th. This is great
And
time.
actually, we were hoping it'd go up today, but we're still waiting for one more confirmation. So hopefully by tomorrow we'll have that last confirmation. And if not, we'll just put to be announced. And then as we go across the country, we'll be announcing it on the website.
Awesome. Awesome. And people can find out about the tour at lynnecox.com.
Calm. Right.
Right on.
And also I'm on Facebook. So I'll be posting information about that, and then be meeting swimmers and dog people and readers and all of the above on the way across the country and back. It should be really great.
Awesome. Awesome. Lynne, thank you so much for sharing your time with us. This has been great.
It has been really great, Tim. I really appreciate being able to talk with you. It's been fun.
Thanks for listening, everyone. Now get outside and play.